So now the following parts.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Following what Brahim has said about concerning the critical period hypothesis, he said that there is a period of time in which the acquisition of a language is more rapidly and easily to acquire. And here, anyone who wants to acquire a language just before or after this critical period will face some difficulties. And we will see some considerations that examines this critical period, starting by the neurobiological considerations. And here from the title you may notice that there are two main components, neural and biological. That is to say, it has to do with neurology and biology. Yeah, the brain, the function of the brain, and the biological considerations. And here in this part, I'm going to tackle four main elements, namely the hemispheric lateralization. As we all know, the brain is divided into two hemispheres, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. And we will see this how some functions are assigned or either lateralized to either parts of the brain. Okay, the next part is the biological timetables. That is to say that the acquisition of a language has a specific timetable. Okay? And right hemispheric participation, as we will see, not only the left hemisphere that has a function in acquiring a language, but also the left hemisphere has a role in this. Yes. Okay. The last part we are going to tackle is the anthropological evidence. I guess it is the letter here. And here, if we look at the lateralization of the brain, here psycholinguists ask such questions like how might neurobiological development affect second language success? That is to say, as the brain matures, as the brain develops and grows, does it affect the successful acquisition of a language, of a second language? And also the second question they are tackling here is does the maturation of the brain at some stage spell the doom of language acquisition ability? That is to say, does the brain's maturation or growth, does it affect the ability of language, does it stop the ability of acquiring a language appropriately? Okay? And here, the first part we are going to tackle is the left hemispheric lateralization, which seems some scholars have singled out this lateralization of the brain as the key answer for such a question. Okay? Such questions that we have asked earlier. And here, there is evidence in neurological research that as the brain matures, some functions are assigned or either lateralized to the left hemisphere and others are assigned to the right hemisphere.
That's the meaning of
lateralization.
Assigning.
Yes. And here we find that intellectual, logical, and analytic functions appear majorly in the left hemisphere. And the emotional and social needs, that is the motor things and other activities appears in the right hemisphere. Okay, and yes, and this will be tackled in details in chapter 5.
Yes, one part.
Yes, thank you. Okay, generally, to stress this, as we have seen this lateralization, the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere, and the focus on that the left hemisphere has the function of the language, mainly the language, generally a stroke or accident. This psychologist claims so. A stroke or accident victim who suffers a lesion, that is an injury, an abnormal injury, in the left hemisphere will manifest some language impairment. This is the evidence they give.
What do you mean, Khadija?
Yeah, just we have said last time that the lateralization of the brain, okay, the left, we have the left hemisphere, which is mainly
For language.
for language, okay, and to stress this as an evidence for this, they say that a stroke or accident in the left hemisphere affects the development, okay, yes, and just as opposed to the right hemisphere. If we have any injury in the right hemisphere, there will be, I guess, no impairment. Okay. However, just to draw any conclusions from what we have said, Miller and Whittaker concluded that there are enough data that accumulated to challenge the simple view that the left hemisphere is the language hemisphere and the right hemisphere does something else. Okay? Yeah, this means that there should be no conclusions. Okay? And
was it biologically or medically proved that it is the left hemisphere which hosts language?
I guess so. I guess they all claim.
Is it by linguists or by
Biological.
Specialized people, depending on the field where you are. So there is a field of neurolinguistics,
Yes.
the combination of language, analysis of language in relation to the brain. Like we talk about sociolinguistics, the relationships between society and language, which is something for people. They have competence and expertise in the field of the brain, how it's mentioned, of the word, and then they have knowledge and expertise in the field of language. So they do the experiments using the techniques and expertise in relation to the brain, and then they, the trigger of language data. And if you notice that there is, magnetics and analysis.
Yeah,
using materials.
Yeah, based on this discovery, if you still remember with the total physical response by James Usher, you see that he makes use of both hemispheres. Right. The left hemisphere is for language learning. Yes, for language learning, how long is it learned, and the right hemisphere is for the movement.
Yes, the motor things,
So
activities.
that's why there is the word of portion there. Can you go to the previous slide?
Yes.
Let me go down. Go down again. The exceptional, the remark. Go.
This one?
Yes, this is the word of portion. However, in algorithm, how commonly to challenge the simple view of this repartition. There could be people who have different functions.
Yes, sure.
So, but how can we relate this to the acquisition of language for children and adults? Because this is the big question of the chapter.
Yes.
So here he's comparing damaged people with normal people.
No, this is given, this evidence, please don't focus on the evidence I've given, because this evidence is mainly given to show, okay, to stress the fact that language is in the left hemisphere, okay?
He's responsible.
Not, we will see what you're talking about in the biological timetables, that is to say
Because as far
We will come to your answer. We will come to your answer. We're going step by step. Did you read this chapter, Naima?
yes.
As an exception to support the exception, research also in the field of language acquisition, neurolinguistics, showed that leafy people have reverse in their brain. So language is in the right hemisphere rather than in the hemisphere. That's the purpose. So there is a difference. Okay? There are options. People have different options. Okay? Yes.
All right. Now moving from where the lateralization of the brain, the functions of the language is lateralized, we move to another area, a more crucial question for second language researchers that has centered on when lateralization takes place and whether or not that lateralization process affects language acquisition.
Someone did the beginning of the answer for Americans?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here is a chart that that shows different figures explaining when lateralization takes place. And Eric Lindbergh, 1967, said that lateralization is a slow process that begins around the age of 2 and is completed around puberty. And Norman Gistwind, 1970, suggests a much earlier age than the first figure. Okay, then Stephen Krashen comes also in 1973. He said that the completion of lateralization takes place around the age of 5. And then Thomas Scoville made a distinction between the emergence of lateralization and also the completion of lateralization. He said that lateralization emerges at birth, but it is not obvious or evident until the age of 5. And he said that the completion of this is evident at puberty. Does it make sense?
Of the previous and the following, okay? That is to say, it starts early, but it's not very evident, and okay, it becomes evident only after the age of 5, towards puberty, it goes on, okay, into later age.
Another element which is biological timetables, and which is also under the critical period hypothesis, and it claims that the critical period hypothesis claims that there is such a biological timetable. That is to say, as we have said last time, there is a specific period in which the acquisition is rapid and easy in comparison with acquiring a language after or before. Okay?
Some principles, as you can notice, they complement each other. Some people talk in terms of CDH, okay? And others they talk in terms of biological timetables. You know, theories, and the theorists, when they are talking, each one has got its own taste of terminology. But the ideas complement each other. Yeah. So, for example, critical period is a hypothesis, but then there were people who were talking about biological timetables.
That's why it is called from the beginning neurobiological. It combines the two. Okay. Then Scoville cited evidence for a sociobiological critical period in various species of mammals and birds. He said that there is a social factor, okay, that contains the argument of an accent-related critical period. And here he made an analogy between the acquisition of baboons, a kind of apes, and birds, monkeys, and a kind of birds. They say that their language is their accent. Okay, their accent is accepted to be pre-programmed. Okay, that is genetically inherited. Okay, and he said that this sociobiological evidence that Scoville cited persuades us to conclude that native accents may be a genetic leftover that is remained genetically and is no longer necessary for the preservation of human species.
So here we're talking about another variable, which is society or social relations.
A social factor that,
in addition to biological timetable and.
He said that there is such a social bonding accent that combines that makes the accent at puberty, that enables species first to form an identity with their own community as they anticipate roles of parenting and partnership, and second to attract mates of their own kind as an instinctive drive to maintain their own species. This is just an accent-related. Okay. On the other hand, Walsh and Diller proposed that different aspects of a second language are learned optimally at different ages. Okay? He said that the lower order processes, that is pronunciation, phonetics, and so on, are dependent on early maturing and less adapted macroneural circuits. That is, as the brain is here, it talks about the children. Okay, as their brain is still not mature enough, they tend to acquire pronunciation and phonetics and phonology easily, whereas while higher order, that is semantics and syntax and so on, that pragmatics and so on, are more dependent on the late neural circuits. That is, as the brain grows and matures, they are exposed to learn those complex, those higher order elements. Okay, this.
To some extent, the simplest aspects of language are learned at an early age because of the cognitive development of the mind. How's that? That's the only level it's reached. By the development of the brain, then the learning goes on into higher levels, more complex levels that go further into pragmatics, semantics.
And this explains why college students can learn many times the amount of grammar and and something missing. The amount of grammar and vocabulary that elementary school students can learn in a given period of time. That is, they learn more than the elementary school students.
And I think the evidence here is that the children's brains are considered elastic.
The children's
Elastic, while the older people brains are rigid.
Okay, another element is the right hemispheric participation. That is not only the left hemisphere that is concerned with the language, with the acquisition of the language, but also the right hemispheric participation. And let's see how. Okay, another branch of neurolinguistic research focused on the role of the right hemisphere in the acquisition of a second language. And Obler, 1981, page 58, noted that in second language learning, there is significant right hemispheric participation, especially at the early stages of learning it. Okay, and here this participation is defined in chapter 5 as strategies of acquisition. Okay, that there are some strategies that the learner uses to acquire a second language appropriately and easily and rapidly.
At this moment, we just need to know that
there are some strategies.
Yes, there are some strategies in chapter 5.
Yes.
At the moment, we have to get up to the fact that the right hemisphere is
Has a yes.
in early first language.
And some of these strategies, as we will see in chapter 5, is the strategy of guessing at meanings and of using formulaic utterances. Genesi 1982, page 321, concluded that there may be greater right hemisphere involvement in language processing in bilinguals, people who speak and who acquire, first, bilinguals who acquire their second language late relative to their first language, that is, they acquire the second language formally at school or whatever, and in bilinguals who learn it in informal contexts. They are exposed to it.
And we're going to see in this today another principle, which is bilingualism.
Yes. Second language learners, particularly adult learners, might benefit from more encouragement of right brain activity in the classroom context. And here we will see with some approaches to second language learning, we will see that the natural approach and TPR, total physical response, are employed in in the classroom for this purpose. Okay, the last element, which is anthropological evidence. Okay, here anthropologist Jane Hill, 1970, cited anthropological research on non-Western societies that yielded evidence that adults can acquire second language perfectly. And in these communities, there was at least 2 dozens of languages, okay, were spoken among those communities, and they were exogamous units. That is to say, they marry, as we have seen, as Sophia mentioned in a previous presentation. They marry outside the group just to acquire another language. Okay, and this anthropologist made a study on those people. Okay, and he found. Okay. Sorensen, 1967, studied the Tucano culture of South America and reported that during adolescence, individuals actively and almost suddenly began to speak 2 or 3 other languages to which they had been exposed at some point. Okay? In adulthood, a person may acquire more languages as he approaches the old age, and he will go on to perfect his knowledge of all languages at his disposal. That is to say, this to some extent contradicts what we have seen last time, that there is a critical period hypothesis where language is acquired, and beyond this, there will be no language, no successful acquisition. And these 2 researchers found out that adolescents can actively in those communities, because he restricted his studies to those communities. He said that adolescents can speak 2 or 3 other languages, and adults can speak more languages. Okay.
And what is particular about these people is that they can reach a level of perfection.
Yes.
Okay, which is not
at their disposal.
normal, which is what I'm saying, because rarely you can find people speaking more than one language in a perfect manner. So these researchers, what they did is that they went to these groups, studied them, and they noticed that this has to do with their way of life. What is this particular about their way of life? Is that these people usually they finish to marry at an early age, okay, from other groups. So there was a kind of relationship between different groups, and there was a kind of openness to learning their languages, because they know that at some point in time when you marry, this was the fashion, if you want to say, among these people. And so that's why this made them to learn a language, and even to learn it to the stage or to the level of perfection. So
yes.
This has to do with, well, here we're talking about way of life. When we're talking about way of life and culture and so on, we're talking about another field of research, which is called
Anthropology. Yeah.
Okay, and hence the term anthropological evidence. Okay?
Yes. And Hill argued what we have said last time. Hill, 1970, argued that this study, that is mainly done on monolingual communities, is inappropriate to be taken universally, and that multilingual speech communities of various types deserve a careful study. Okay, here is a chart that summarizes the whole my part. We can say here we can see that it's chapter 3, age and acquisition, the critical period, and one of the elements of the critical period is neurobiological considerations. Okay, in neurobiological considerations we have tackled 4 main elements: hemispheric lateralization, biological timetables, right hemispheric participation, and anthropological evidence. This is just to recap what I have said, and I leave the floor for Miriam to tackle another element.
Concerning question, how it's going to be related. Well, when we see the relationship, I think with the end. Okay? Clearly, the relationship between all what we are seeing now at the beginning of the chapter and teaching foreign or second language. Okay? But what we need to know now is the various principles related to theories and hypotheses in relation to first language acquisition and second language acquisition. So we have related to first language acquisition. We have this anthropological evidence related to second or third language, okay, acquisition. So that's the, and then at the end we will focus more because of the chapter. Every chapter there is a last section which focuses on the relationship and the implications of these SLA theories and principles to teaching a foreign language. Okay? Now, before we go on, let me